Being positive instead of negative, and reframing, because boundaries used to give me the ick, like work-life balance used to give me the ick. It was just never taught positively, similarly to failure. Like, now I have a healthier and more exciting outlook on navigating life with those, and I can honestly say, like, I love boundaries, and I think I first learned that boundaries were okay in the context of work-life balance and saying no, but it's very difficult to unlearn the idea that saying no isn't being mean or being cruel. It's about being good to yourself.
Agreed. Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, I think it's also, again, being good to that other person too, right? Because it's better for me to give them the best of myself than leftovers anyway. Same with, it's best to give myself the best of myself and not leftovers. Hi, I'm Amber.
And I'm Elayna. We're glad you're here to join us where
everything is learning.
I'm just going to start by saying I love laughing with you, because I was just in stitches a second ago, and I'm not even going to play like we weren't just dying laughing because I was going to carry it.
You can't say countdown and not expect me to go. It is what it is. It's your fault, really. I don't know what you're expecting.
I know.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm just gonna get right into it.
That's great.
Because
we might as well just hit the ground running.
Why not? Yeah. Like, I'm just, now everything you say throughout this entire conversation is going to somehow bring me to another song. Because that's what we were just playing.
I'm sure, inevitably. And then the same with you, everything you say. So I feel like we had one of these last season too, where everything we said ended up in some kind of a song or a reference of some kind. So buckle up, kids. Hop in the station wagon facing backwards. We're rolling out. Oh my
gosh. We had a girl in our class who had one of those. We felt like we were rolling in a limo. We were not.
It was the best. I think my parents liked it because we were so far away from them, facing and talking the opposite direction. So they actually had quiet in the front of the car.
Those cars were so unsafe.
Oh, that might also be why we. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. That's not why we had one. It was the backwards facing part, and it fit everybody. Oh my god.
Okay, work-life balance. Like, go stay on track.
Yes, let's balance. Focus.
Let's work. 4 songs.
This is the balance part.
Yeah. All right.
Right? Yeah, work. Every time you say work, it'll be a whole nother song. Play along at home and see how many songs do you start singing as we speak.
I've already sang somehow Rock the Boat. I was like, work. But also
that's funny.
And like 4 other songs
that doesn't even have work in it.
Something from Rent just popped in my head.
Work.
Oh, Brianna.
That's what I went to.
Yeah, I like that one. That one's a good one.
That's a good one.
Okay.
Focus.
Now we're gonna try to dive in.
Let's dive in for real. Good stuff.
Well, here's what I was going to start with. Growing up, which obviously I haven't done much of.
Just the right amount of it.
Just the right amount. I was thinking about work-life balance, and in all honesty, growing up, I don't think very many people in my life had a healthy work-life balance. In fact, I think it was so poorly modeled that I remember hearing the phrase work-life balance for the first time and laughing hysterically about it. I was like, work is life and
I was at a big old age when I first heard that phrase. Yeah,
really?
For sure.
Were you?
No, what's that? I definitely think I mean
I was either in high school
at
or
least
in college.
20s, but probably 30s. I think 30s. No, I think I was in my 30s.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, like work was life and life was work, and that was kind of like this underlying motto in my adolescence. I feel like,
and
I
feel like it wasn't underlying in mine. It was, it was overlying. It was out
on
there.
the wall. You walk in the kitchen and it's just sitting right there.
Yes.
But,
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, for me, that when the pandemic hit, I realized how much, and I know you did too, we were burning the candle at both ends. Like, I think for me, one of the things I know I've constantly talked to you about is like being an unmarried woman in American society has this subtle / not so subtle way. I know you know what I'm talking about. Like, of saying like, work yourself to the GD bone and you will find happiness in your success. And that's what
you got to do all the things as a single woman in America, right? You have to be all the things.
All the things.
And the best at all of those things. You better
and if
work,
you're not the best,
have
then
a great career. You better have an amazing home. You better be able to make your own sourdough bread from scratch. You better be able to sew your own clothes. I'm just kidding.
You said sourdough bread, and I was like, I know you're talking about you right now.
But like, I feel like that's so true. It's definitely a thing. Definitely a thing.
Yeah,
I think every group of people has their own
a similar
has something like that
for sure.
Yeah. But
and I'm definitely projecting here.
You know, yeah. Oh, you're allowed. You're allowed.
No, I'm definitely projecting here in terms of that. Like, and I know that you know my work-life balance. Like, you knew me when my work-life balance was like really not great,
unbalanced.
It was
right? Same.
I really like. I always had fun outside of work. That wasn't it. It was just I was doing way too much work. Like, it just was way too much. It was just way too much. And to give an example, I was the person who convinced my partner several times. Like, this is how, and this is kind of like maybe a bad example, but this is how much I would go and fit things in and push.
Right.
So we were working at the same place when this happened. And I remember talking to you after I got back because I told you I needed vacation. So I was the type of person who would tell my partner, like, we could see an entire foreign country in like 6 days or less. But this one Christmas, we flew when we were living in Atlanta. We flew from Atlanta to Northern California to see family in San Francisco. I don't know if you remember this whole thing. Then we drove to the LA area. And then we flew to New York to see the rest of our family. And that meant not going to Connecticut too, where we also would spend the holidays. And we did flying from Atlanta to staying in the San Francisco area. We did that for 2 or 3 days, drove down for a day, like took a whole day driving down to the LA area, stayed there for 2 or 3 days, flew over to New York, to the Rochester area where I'm from, saw family there, and then flew back to Atlanta so that we could go to work the next day. And we did all of that in like 7 or 8 days. So like, yeah, I always did way too much and I did it way too often. I see you there like holding back a laugh.
No, I'm just like, that just gave me whiplash thinking about it, not even like without experiencing it, you know? But I think you bring up a lot of good points there. When we talk about like work-life balance, it's an interesting thing that like, yes, we are talking about your employment and then not, right? Like work and life. But at the same time, that drive can overflow into other areas. Right. Where you're kind of just like, yeah. So I like that you brought that up. And then like, I also just want to be the one that also brings in the caveat that says everybody's different. Sure. Right. So for some people like that, they're like, oh, that's awesome. That would be great. I would love that. That does work for me.
Right.
And then there's people like me who had just a little bit of a panic attack and pulled out a paper bag to breathe into. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's no matter
and I'm
what
more
we're
that
talking
now.
about. Right. And again, evolution, we change over time. But
right.
No matter what we are talking about, as a listener, understand that we know there's a spectrum of people. Yeah. And by no means are we experts in like, this is how you're supposed to be. We are not the end goal, because the end goal is just progress, and that looks different for everybody. So always just remember that our experiences are just ours, and we're not saying other people should be this way or whatever. We're just, sharing candidly. So if that's cool for you and you're like, that sounds awesome, amazing. Please don't mishear anything we're saying as that's a negative thing.
Right.
Go on your crazy trips with God. Like, go with God.
Yeah.
and Delta. Like, enjoy.
Yes, Delta.
But
Couldn't afford anything without you, Delta.
oh, listen, we're Frontier over here, so I hear
Oh,
you.
okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Frontier, we're like, does this plane have doors? It's too cheap.
I love it.
But I think, to your point, I actually had a different experience in terms of work life balance. My parents balanced it really well. My parents made a priority that at least one parent would be home with us all the time.
Oh.
And then so my dad worked, my mom stayed at home, and my dad still now. I will say I don't know how this actually worked out for him. I should ask him in terms of his work life balance. Now that I think about it, but he would work, but then he also like he poured into us. So he was our soccer coach, baseball coach. I remember he would come in elementary school and do this program my school had where he and my mom would come and like it was something that parents could sign up to volunteer to do, and they would come talk about art, and they would give them these like big posters of like an artwork and then like discussion and information about it. They would come just talk to us about it.
That's really
So
cool.
like I had a different view of that in my home.
Mm,
However, I went to a very competitive high school
yeah.
where it was all about you only matter if you are getting all the A's and going to become a doctor or lawyer.
Right.
Like, so I had these two very different like two different kind of worlds, I guess, happening.
Right.
But I do think when we talk about work life balance, a lot of people assume that that's like something that's afforded for the rich, right? Because like,
Yeah.
oh, if you're not stressing about money, you don't have to work as much. And so you can, it's a lot easier to have a balance. You can enjoy those kinds of things. And I think I was really privileged to see that that wasn't necessarily the case. My parents worked very hard. They had to.
Yeah. Same.
We have a very large family and there was just a lot of stuff all the time. So I don't want to put that lightly, but I think they still were able to, they had priorities. And the priority wasn't, let's make Goo Gobs of money. The priority was, let's have a balance because our family is actually more important than a career. A career fuels the family. And that was like their perspective. And
Right.
they were willing to do whatever they had to do to make that happen. Like, I don't think my dad had his dream job, you know what I mean?
Right.
But so he worked really hard and then he made up for it in the other ways with doing pouring into himself and others in the ways that he loved to do. And that was how he found a balance.
That's
I
really
think that's really a
interesting.
cool, yeah, it's a cool model.
I
And then, so I, as a result, kind of run the spectrum then, right? So, like, as a student, the funny thing is, as a student, where I went to that competitive school, that didn't phase me. I was so chill about, I had a great work life balance when it came to school. I was like, okay, this is something I have to do. I'll do it. I did my work as quickly as possible. Um, just the right amount of effort to get a good grade, but not to be overstressed or overworked because balance.
right.
But at the same, and then I also worked and had a lot of extracurricular activities and spent time with family friends. And I require a lot of quiet downtime, a lot of
Mm,
alone time. So I had a good balance of that. Things changed for me though when work became what I was living off of.
yeah.
And the work was the money I was making to survive, right? So then I noticed a change after college, even in college a little bit. But then it's a hard thing when you go into education or something like that, like a one of those careers where it's very, very hard work and it is a calling because you're pouring into people and it's one of those things that the goal isn't money. Think
Right.
of quite a few of those like service careers,
Yeah.
and so I so it changed for me for a lot of reasons. One being the money was what I was living off of. Now it wasn't just to buy shoes or whatever.
Right.
So money's a priority. You have to have that to live, right? So that's very important too. And let's be honest, education is not the most lucrative career.
No, not in the United
So
States, that's for
I
sure.
was taking on part-time jobs and extra things to make ends meet and to, try to do what they call savings. I don't know if you've heard of that. I hadn't heard of it for a while. I wasn't able, but anyway, also in that kind of a job, the work to me was sacred. This
Yeah.
isn't, this isn't just going for a paycheck. This is pouring into people, which is beyond a paycheck, right? So it's people are like the most important things on this planet to me. So I would pour myself wholeheartedly into that and end up giving too much of myself to where I
Right.
was drained. And like I run into that kind of work like like a kid doing a cannonball on the first day of summer break. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
all in, and that's hard. Finding a balance with that is hard. Like you said, society tells us we're supposed to. That's another reason that was about the struggle for me. And then honestly, this sounds bad, but like I could, right? I could
Yes.
do my job, do it well, get into a good rhythm, system, groove. So I could take on more. And then I would always look for more to take on because that's who I am. I'd be like, oh, I see this problem over here. Instead of pointing it out and saying someone else should fix it, I'm going to take the initiative and fix the problem. All those things that they tell you you're supposed to be when you go to your interview for a job, right?
Yeah.
Be a self starter, take initiative. They don't say know when to stop.
Right, because that's not what places want for you to do either,
Right.
because then they can take that from you. And
right.
To be fair, I don't think that schools necessarily demand that of their teachers, but I think as educators, we almost demand it of ourselves. You kind of had talked about it, I think, in the first conversation about like how we do that to ourselves. Like not what was the language you used? Not damage ourselves. We like
self-sabotage?
No. So, like self-harm. Like we make that our thing. Self-induced. Thank you. Self-induced harm. Like in the sense of like we know that we're doing too much, but we just cannot help it. And
because we can justify it. It's important work.
We're like, oh,
or that kind of
yes, like one of the main messages I would give myself was, okay, I need this money, so I also need to coach, and I need to run this club, and I need to also work this part-time job, and I need that's real, that financial stress, especially when you have a vocational job. And I'm also realizing from this conversation, hearing you talk about your family, what a healthy way to teach work-life balance. And then when you get to situations where I think it's really interesting, where I'm going with this is my parents loved their jobs so much that it wasn't stressful for them. So while it looked stressful,
so the
to
balance
my
is
siblings
skewed
and me,
because they love it.
Right. And that's where I learned it. And I didn't realize that until just this minute in this conversation.
That is so interesting. Right.
That's why I loved what I did, because it brought out the best in me. And I gave everything. Like service is the most innate thing in my being, service and love. And if I can make people feel seen and loved and be of service, that sets my soul on fire. And for me, that's
so
why
fulfilling.
Yes. And that's why I couldn't find a balance, because the best parts of me were happening while I was working, and the best parts of me were also happening when I wasn't. But the displacement of that balance is the problem. It's almost like what's the scale that we use in science class? Oh gosh,
pH
why can't
scale?
I think of it?
The Richter scale?
No. The actual scale? Like measurement scale.
The hardness test?
I'm thank you for listening.
A balance?
Like just like a balancing, like that's what I'm seeing. Like just like the weight distribution changes. Yeah, I think maybe it is just a balance scale. But like, so sometimes when like my work life was really thriving, my life outside wasn't as important, and vice versa. And that's the hard part.
That's so interesting. Like that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was like that validation that you get in your work. Sometimes you don't get that outside of work too, right? Like that, the positive, the reward, the reinforcement, the like, hey, good job. That was amazing. You really excel at this. Whether it's external or internal, sometimes we just don't get that same validation and reinforcement outside. And so of course we're going to pour more into it there. There's so many reasons that balance can get out of whack, for sure.
For sure. I mean, like one of the other ones that we talk about too is like grief, when we're managing grief and we're managing loss, and how that can skew your work-life balance, because you go into work and it's like, oh, I
So many
either have
things.
to overperform or I can't even perform at all. And then your life outside is like, now I have to sit with this grief. So how do I even balance my
Right.
life in this moment? Or
Right.
when you are living paycheck to paycheck, like how can you even enjoy work when you're having to go there and just do
How do
your
you justify
job?
a balance?
Right. There is no
Yeah,
balance for
how do you
that.
justify a balance when, yeah, when you like, well, I could either relax or go make more money to put food on the table. Like that's what
Right.
there's not a choice, right? So
Right.
like this is something that it's such a hard thing that's so complicated for so many people for so many different reasons. And everyone can have a reason and a different cause for it being out of whack. And I think the biggest thing would be identifying, like we've kind of had to sit now in this conversation, even to sit and say, what is that coming? Where is that coming from for me? What is
Right.
that about? Because the whole time, what I didn't realize until the pandemic and doing like that forced pause, I didn't realize I was miserable. I didn't realize I was unhappy and overworked and overstressed. I didn't realize I hadn't caught my breath in about 5 years. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Because
And so I
where do
like you
you
when
learn?
you're in it, you can't.
Right. Why is it not a high school class for you to learn life balance? Why? I know we have like 100 different things that should be taught throughout school, and I really think it should
And I'm
even
sure
be taught
everybody
like,
listening right now is like, I
yeah,
got one too.
right, yeah, exactly. And like this should be taught in kindergarten though. Like
That's
we
the
should
thing, right?
not be. There are so many things that should not happen that happen in schools and things that
Right.
should happen that don't, and vice versa. But like
Right.
you're talking about the pandemic in particular, I think really opened a lot of eyes to a lot of things that were happening. Everybody was working too hard, too much. No
Right.
one was slowing down enough. And I'm not saying that the pandemic was good. Obviously, it was horrible. We lost
Obviously there's
people.
horrible
That's not
things
what
to
we're
it. Right.
saying.
Right.
Um, and it changed the course of really human history, but or at least present day history. But
Hmm.
I really believe that there a major message for people was we need to sit for a second and we need to think about ourselves and we need to think about others. And I don't think that that worked out particularly well for everybody, but I will say
So
that,
many people hated that.
right. And people were just going
That
out
was
anyway,
interesting.
and people were just not doing what was
Right.
best for humanity. But like for
Right.
people like you and I, we learned a lot about ourselves. Like we were
Yeah.
killing ourselves. We were like, I know for me, I was like binging work, like especially during the pandemic. I will never
If
forget.
work was a drug, I was shooting up all the time. Yeah.
Seriously though, like it was legit.
Yep.
I I just was binging work. Like I wasn't binging
Yeah.
Netflix like normal people.
Yeah.
I was
Right.
binging work. I was working 20-hour days, 6 days a week, and it was because I
Mm-mm.
wanted to make sure everyone was okay. I wanted to
Right.
make sure everyone was getting what they needed in their education, everybody was being supported the way that they needed. Um, and one day the best leader on earth, aka Missy, who um she
Mm-hmm.
stopped
Love
me in a
her.
Zoom meeting and she was like, I noticed several days in a row you were on for 14 hours straight. Do not get on. Like, do not get on. I don't want to see you
Right.
on. If I see you on, I'm going to text you and tell you to get off. And
Right.
honestly, like what helped me to create a work-life balance in that moment was creating a very rigid schedule. Because one of the other
Mm.
things that I did in order to find balance, or I do to find balance, is sometimes the scale gets way weighed one way and I like
Yep.
go and like kind of betray myself and my well-being to
Right.
get like the highest level of output in something that I'm trying to do differently.
Right.
But when I made a rigid schedule for myself, I was able to be like, okay, this is the allotted amount of time that you have for this. Um, and I noticed that life was so much easier than it originally started in the pandemic, where there was just this incredible halt. Um,
Right.
and I realized too, when I personally have a very structured schedule, I am at my highest level of output in certain situations. And
Right.
I was
Okay. Yeah.
doing things in a shorter amount of time, and I was taking my time doing things I loved, and I recharged. And, it really worked in that moment of stress. And, it was just this really interesting thing that I learned about myself that I now know in, my iOS updates where I've taken it with me.
Right. I love that. I Yeah, it's so neat. Like thinking about how, again, we're also different, and so we need different things. And as you're talking about a rigid schedule, there's a part of my soul that was like like panicked and like couldn't breathe for a second, because that is not comfortable to me necessarily. But at the same time, I can get too into the life part and not enough work part. So again, my balance goes out of whack that way. But I
Mm,
do have to kind of put myself on a schedule, or more of a schedule, to say, here's build in times for myself. You're going to work on this piece of your life or this piece. Like I have so many projects going right now. You know what I
right.
mean?
Hmm.
We've got this going on. I've got work going on. I've got um, just house stuff that I'm trying to manage.
Right.
And projects I want to create, like things I want to do for fun, and things I want to, I don't know. There are
Explore.
lots of different things and pieces of myself that I want to bring balance to. And so I'm kind of
Sure.
creating a schedule, not as rigid, but kind of making sure I build time in for all those things. So then I can physically see in my schedule a balance of all the things.
Right.
And that's working out really well for me. A, it's keeping my anxiety down from work stressors, but then B, not letting me get too much into the let's just enjoy life and forget about work things.
Right.
Um, and a lot of like everyone's balance is going to be different.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, because again, it's such a complex issue, there's so many pieces to it. And each of us have, I think the goal is to protect our own peace.
Right.
And that looks different for each of us because our piece is different. We require different things, we're working for different reasons, whatever that is. And then creating a structure or a life around that where you are prioritized and what you need is prioritized.
Right.
And not just I need money, right? Like yes, we do. I get that. But then what are you also doing to take care of yourself, and how are you doing that?
Right.
Um and I know, again, going back to, I could just we the service field, right, in education, as a mom, as a parent, like one of the biggest things I have to remember is that you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Right.
And
Yep.
so as much as you're like a big piece of my soul is serving others, helping others, I'm actually not as efficient in doing that when I'm not taking care of myself. So I'm actually not doing as good of a job taking care of other people when I don't take care of myself. So now it's
Right.
actually maybe become a disservice to others for me to not take care of myself. And
Right.
putting it out there that way, it's changed my perspective on things a lot too. And like you're saying, community is so essential, but
Yeah.
also taking my own advice and doing the things I know I need to do,
Yep.
and like putting that in place is just life changing. I think I've said before that in the classroom or working with students, if I've ever said that anything to them, I have to be like, oh crap, I got to do that too. That's not just for them, that's for you too. And that's been helpful, I think.
It,
But one of
that,
the ways, what I wanted to say too, one of the things in protecting your peace, I think you were talking about creating systems that
sure.
work, is a
Uh-huh.
great way to do that in
Yeah.
protecting your peace. And as a parent, my mom, the work life balance for a parent is so hard, right? Because there's
Yeah.
always something to do. As a teacher, there's always work to be done. There's always
Right.
more to do because tomorrow's coming and there's still dishes. Well, now as a teacher, well, sometimes as a teacher, but as a parent, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the day-to-day tasks of life don't end. You have to do them all again tomorrow. You don't get to check that off your to-do list and it goes away for forever. You check it
Right.
off for that moment. And so it's really hard. But one thing I love about my mom is that she taught us all independence and fostered that. And I'd be like, Mom, that's so cool that you like really at a young age helped us do things and like really fostered that within us to know how to take care of ourselves. And she's like, you do know I did that so I didn't have to tie your shoes every day. I had 6 kids. That's 6 pairs of shoes. But if I teach you to tie your shoes, I'm tying mine and mine
Yeah.
only. Right? So like one of the ways she protected her peace was by giving us skills and
Right.
giving us strategies. So then she could be a person and not a shoe tire or whatever the case may be. And it's just a cool perspective on all the ways that you can, again, be the architect of your life to keep it peaceful and to keep a balance.
Yeah. I love that you're acknowledging like so many different pieces, and like I sometimes I think about different jobs that people have, and I'm just like, how are you a parent and standing upright and also have that job, right?
I thought that about educators every day. I'm like,
Oh,
you
every
come and deal
day.
with somebody else's kids for hours, and then you go home and then have to pour into lovingly the same way yours. That's a
Right.
lot of yourself you're pouring. Yeah.
Right.
And other
And it's
professions too. That's just, again, the one that I know the most
best
intimately.
we
But
know personally.
yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely see that piece, and it taught me so much about who I wanted to be as a parent. And I learned so much from other parents in
Right.
that. I also like thought about doctors and how much school that they had to do, and
Oh my
nurses.
gosh,
And
right?
then
Right.
then in also like, we've talked about the pandemic, like being around sick people and then going home to take care of your babies. And you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, there's a
Mm-hmm.
really good possibility that I'm going to bring illness home. And like, it just goes back to like stressors. We were just talking about stress, like
Right.
stress
Right.
significantly impacts your work-life balance. And,
Right.
there were just so many things during that time and so many things now. And I think one of the greatest lessons learned for people during this time, the single hardest and easiest takeaway I've learned recently from having work-life balance is saying no.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
I was never allowed to say no growing up. So
Preach.
learning to say that was a challenge.
So hard.
And
Yes.
I necessarily, my younger sister used to say me like say, I always used to do everything with my chest. Like, like say it with your chest. It was like a thing that we used to say in our household, like kind of like,
Right.
like just be confident, like just say it out loud. Like,
loud and proud. Get it out there.
and the one thing that I just couldn't say it with my chest with was no.
Right.
And I found myself like, I don't know, just like having to almost practice saying it. I found myself like not being charged by the no, but being charged by and like reinvigorated by like what I was able to do with my time. And
Right.
when I said no to things. And I've also just recently learned about boundaries, and like that's gold, because if you can't say no,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't hold a boundary. And like
Right.
I learned about meditation and breathing and how that was really good for me in order to be able to build up the ability to say no. And it takes a lot of practice. And
Yes.
it's so great for someone with similar thought patterns as mine, where like my mind, and I know you know this because we talked about our like monkeys in our brains, but like
Mm-hmm.
my mind is going 1,000 miles per hour at all times.
Right.
My husband talks about how he has a nothing box, and I think, and this is not a negative, but I think that when he jokes about a nothing box, he'll ask people about it. And a majority of the people in our lives who have a nothing box are men, and the majority of people in our lives who don't identify as women.
Right.
I think that's something, there's something to be said there with that. But like I'm having several side conversations in my head right now. And it's almost like by saying no, I'm giving my brain a big deep breath and saying like, hello, nice to see you there, and nice to be seen. And like almost giving myself one of those huge squeezes and just being like, it is okay to say no. No is a full sentence.
Yes. Yes. 100% yes. But also, hello. Is me you're looking for?
Oh, I just went Adele.
Also Adele. Also the Adele one. But yes. No, you're totally right. No is very, very, very hard. And I'm with you. Not allowed to say no to anything, even with legit reasons growing up, right? And so that became part of like, but what if I do have legitimate reasons? I still can't say no. Like, so then I'm being told I can say no. But now I feel like I have to justify my no every time. So like for me, it was definitely this progression of like, okay, so you're telling me I'm allowed to say no. Okay, this is news to me. Thank you so much. Good. Now, as a child, I would not say no, but I would act
no.
out a no, right? Yes. Yes. So then learning to change the acting of a no to an audible no, and then so that was step one. And then step two, I felt like I had to then justify my no. Like, no, I can't because blah, 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 blah. Right. When like I didn't want to, that's a valid reason.
Yeah.
I didn't have the mental bandwidth. Completely valid reason.
Sure.
I just need a moment of quiet. Valid reason. I don't want to. Still a valid reason. Like, that's all fine. And for me, I wrestle with the balance of, talk about balance, of wanting to help people and pour into my community so that, if should I need anything, not just so that should I need anything, but they can pour into me. But like that's part of community is pouring into other people, but also pouring into myself. And finding that balance between that, because I feel like, again, that's basically all of my work-life balance is pouring into others versus myself and finding that middle point. Because my work is pouring into people. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like the same conversation all the time. Yeah. And it's really hard. And learning to tell myself all what I just said, all those things that like just not wanting to is valid. Talk about community earlier. Same, like my partner is probably the most amazing model of if you don't want to, don't. And he's very clear, like he knows himself very well, what works for him, what doesn't work for him. And he has absolutely no problem saying, no, I'm good, thanks. Or like when we're out somewhere, at family's house, a party, whatever, like, gathering, whatever it is, when he is ready to go, we go. Like he is amazing at it. And I'm like, what's that like? Yeah. You don't have a voice in your head saying like, guilty. It's weird if you leave now. Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. I was like, and you're the Catholic one. I feel like you're supposed to be the one with the guilty conscience all the time. Not me, sir. Like, what? No, I'm just kidding. But like, so having that model every day, that has been amazing. And I've like learned from him, and I'll say in so many things, I'll be like, wait, if he said no and that's okay, I can say no and that's okay. And so like in many aspects of my life, I kind of just use him as a barometer. Yes. As like normal behavior. So I'm like, okay, so okay, I see you, sir. I'm going to copy it. That's been kind of really helpful for me because his actions validate everything I do truly believe. Right. Right. And so that's helped me kind of make that merger for me. And then also just taking the time to come up with like the view and philosophy of how I want life to be. What is important to me? What are my priorities? Why are they my priorities? And then like actually being intentional with that piece of conversation in my own head and life, that's been transformative too. Right. Because I don't try to keep up with the Kardashians. That's never been on my to-do list. So that's helpful, right? But like having all those things like, I guess, I don't know, like sometimes I guess I've compared in my life, but comparison to me is such a thief. Yes. It's so destructive because we aren't the same. So why would you compare yourself to something else when you're not supposed to be the same? Right. You know what I mean? Like you don't see out in nature like a lion comparing himself to a rock or whatever. You know what I mean? They're just like, they just exist. Rocks don't do anything. That was a really bad example. But you know what I'm saying? I got it. Okay. Thank you. Like, it's just, you just have to do your thing. You just do you. Find what works for you, who you are, and stay true to that and honor that. And that for me just changed a lot of my balance. Yeah. And made it that I had to listen to my own advice. And then I had to say, okay, well, now that I have this philosophy of what I want my life to look like, what I want this balance to be like, what can I do to make that happen? And it was a lot of thinking outside the box and a lot of maybe changing things for myself. But instead of like looking at Instagram and comparing myself, I look at Instagram like, ooh, can I try that? So even that perspective shift is just really important. Yeah. And also knowing that we have done this before where we worked exorbitant number of hours in a day and we're pouring into other people, not pouring into ourselves. And just because I could do that doesn't mean I should do that.
Yeah.
Or go back to it. And I don't beat myself up for it. We talked recently about this school year and this new job I took on. And I quickly realized it wasn't working for me. All that work-life balance was way out of whack and it was not honoring myself anymore. And at one point I was like, I used to be able to do this. What is wrong with me? And then I said, nothing's wrong with me.
Right.
It wasn't working for me then either, but I kept going. And that's actually what was wrong, was that I kept going back then. Right now, nothing's wrong with me. This is just where I'm at. This is my limit. And I don't want to do this anymore. Like I can't do this anymore. It was physically bad for me. And I just had to make a change and kind of step out, and I had to think outside the box, and I had to ask for accommodations. And it's been so much healthier since then.
Yeah.
But not beating myself up about the change that I've made, that was really transformative as well.
It's amazing though. You're, first off, it's amazing that you did that. And I remember texting you the day that you told me that you advocated for yourself like you did. And I know how hard and how easy that was. It was hard in the sense of you had to go against what society told you, what you were told growing up, what I was told growing up, and going against sometimes feels like the hardest thing to do, going against society, going against what your family of origin says, going against what you had previously believed. And kind of
honestly, going against what I had committed to. That was actually the biggest one, was like,
that's true.
I knew I took on this role. I knew what was going to come with it. And I said I could do it. And I said I was willing to, because I was willing to do it. And I thought I could do it.
Right.
And then kind of
your authentic self
going against that commitment. Right. Yes. And knowing that that was going to have a negative impact on this institution too, potentially. That actually was the hardest part. That was the biggest, the fight going against that.
Yeah. But you did the damn thing. And that I am so excited for you. And
thank you. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Excited that we all get to hear that people can actually do something like that and live that. And, it was really interesting to like kind of walking beside you while that was happening because of how inspiring it was for me to see you do that and hear what you were doing. And I think being outside of where we were and what we had been doing, it made me kind of realize hindsight, if I were to go back into a position down the road similarly to what we were doing, that I would really need to be able to put things in place to make sure that I didn't do those things again. Right. And I think I kind of ended up making like a short list of questions that I think might be helpful for other people too. So
let's hear them.
I was like, do I feel present in my conversations and time outside of work?
Or can I?
Do I even have the bandwidth?
Because I would start with do I, and then move into can I, right? Do I? Yes or no? Okay, if it's no, can I? Do I have that availability? Yeah.
I love that. And then in my work, is my workload sustainable, or am I constantly playing catch up? Like, and if I'm playing catch up, it can either be because I'm so checked out and tired, or in like not spending enough time, or sometimes it just can swing both ways. It could be, I'm constantly playing catch up because I'm having so much time out, having so much fun outside and in my life, or maybe I'm playing catch up on the other end of it, where I'm
Right.
spending too much time in work, and I'm over committing to things, and I'm overdoing things. And I think I think each of these questions are supposed to check the balance, right? Like,
Right.
do I feel
And
energized or constantly
yep.
drained?
Right.
And then, like, am I
Yep.
prioritizing time for rest and self-care? And I think
Right.
all of those, it's funny that you talked about your partner. I think I do WWPD, like what would Patrick do in those
Right.
situations? Like, for me, with balance and boundaries, like, I think of them as
I love that.
my husband, so this is funny. But
Gonna get
you know
bracelets made up.
but he's taught me so much about boundaries, being positive
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
negative, and
Yep.
reframing, because boundaries used to give me the ick, like work-life balance used to give me the ick. And
Right.
it was just never taught positively. Similarly to failure. Like, now I have a healthier and more exciting outlook on navigating life with those.
Yeah.
And I can
Right.
honestly say, like, I love boundaries. And I think I first learned that boundaries were okay in the context of work-life balance and saying no.
Right.
But it's very difficult to unlearn the idea that saying no isn't being mean or being cruel. It's about being good to yourself.
Agreed. Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, I think it's also, again, being good to that other person too, right? Because
Yes.
it's better for me to give them the best of myself than leftovers anyway. Same with, it's
Yes.
best to give myself the best of myself and not leftovers. So pouring into myself really just benefits all of us, and
Yeah.
taking care of myself and balancing that way. And also just recognizing that there are times in life ebbs and flows. Every single thing is tidal at this point, TIDAL, where like everything is ebbing and flowing constantly. And there are days when this balance might lean one way more than the other. But and that's a natural thing. But I think if you're looking at this as a chunk of time, um, as a constant, right? That's kind of what we're more looking at, is then a reevaluate. But in the meantime, with the ebbs and flows of life, how can we counteract that, and how can we handle that um, within it is also important. I love,
Right.
like, Brene Brown. I love her. She talks about, with her husband, they have this system where they'll come and say, all right, today, listen, I'm functioning at like 80%. How
Oh,
much
I
do
heard.
you have?
Yeah.
And then, he'll say how much. And then, okay, well, since one of us has more, we can do more, and kind of working together as a team. And I just love that idea for so many reasons. Just being honest and admitting, here's where I'm at today, and here's what I'm coming with, sharing that, but then saying, neither of us have 100. So how's this all going to get done? It's not. Let's recalibrate our expectations for the day. Let's come up with a plan of attack. Let's crush this. Right. And I don't know, just kind of keeping that thing and giving yourself permission to do that is really important. So
Right.
that might be the first step for a lot of us. It's just kind of saying, okay, I'm going to give myself permission to take care of myself and to set
Right.
up boundaries. I think it's super, super important.
Yeah.
I love those questions. They're so good.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I hope it helps people, but it's so funny. You're just talking about, like, giving people permission and, like, about
Right?
boundaries. And I had this visual of Oprah going, like, and you get a boundary, and you get a boundary, and have a boundary. And
Yes.
I
Reach
want
under your chair.
you get a free car. Like, I want everyone
Woo!
to have boundaries so that we can all live in the healthiest, happiest, most peaceful version of ourselves.
Preach.
So let's talk about boundaries next time.
Let's do it. Makes sense to me. Have a good one.
See you then. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Everything is Learning.
We'll catch you next time.